My stepson caught me in a moment of vulnerability, and he stepped in to assist me. A true tale of betrayal. The penthouse was enveloped in silence, a stillness that rendered the bustling city beyond as if it belonged to a different realm altogether. Lena rested on the expansive bed, the luxurious black silk robe her husband had gifted her in Paris, gently parting as she settled into the soft embrace of the pillows. The clock had just ticked past 9:30 in the evening. The master bedroom was enveloped in the soft, inviting glow of the city lights filtering through the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows. As the skyline of Chicago sparkled in the distance, Lena found herself turned inward, her body buzzing with a subtle, restless energy that seemed to echo her thoughts. The room was infused with the gentle fragrance of lavender body oil, its soothing essence blending with a richer, more profound scent that lingered in the atmosphere. Her breath came in a steady yet shallow rhythm, her movements deliberate and unhurried, as though she were caught in a moment that lingered, holding its breath in anticipation. The silk robe hung gently, shimmering in the light as it parted, the fabric soothingly cool upon her skin. Her mind wandered far away, while her body held onto a tightness that yearned to be set free. She tilted her head back, her fingers wandering gently, tracing soft, absent patterns over her stomach, her touch both delicate and persistent. The city's glow caressed her skin, a gentle warmth enveloping her as she surrendered to the rhythm surrounding her, the stillness shattered by the sudden snap of the door handle. Lena halted, her hands pausing in the air, her eyes widening, her heart racing as the noise sank in. For a fleeting moment, she reassured herself it was merely nothing, just the building settling or the wind gently rattling the windows. But then the heavy thud of a gym bag hitting the floor echoed, and a knot of dread twisted in her stomach. Ethan lingered in the doorway, his silhouette gently illuminated by the warm glow of the hallway light. He wore gym clothes, his dark hair slightly damp, his chest heaving as if he had just finished a run, his eyes, deep and shadowy like his father's, yet imbued with a gentler youth, met hers for a fleeting moment before glancing down, only to quickly shift away. The silence enveloped them, dense and suffocating, as if the very air had become too fragile to draw in. The air conditioning. She moved forward, the hem of her robe fluttering gently, a cool breeze brushing against her skin. Lena felt the heat rise in her cheeks, her heart racing in her chest, yet she summoned the strength to sit up, pulling the robe closed with a decisive, intentional gesture. Ethan's voice trembled, raw and uncertain. He cleared his throat, his eyes cast downward, as if the weight of his thoughts pressed heavily upon him. Did I leave my protein shake in here? It was a falsehood, and they were both aware of it. His room's mini fridge was perpetually filled to the brim. Lena felt a constriction in her throat as she stood tall, her fingers clutching the smooth silk of her robe. "Your father is in Dubai until Friday," she said, her voice calm, even as her heart raced beneath the surface. It served as a declaration, a gentle nudge to remember. Even so, she found herself questioning the intended recipient, the individual in question. Ethan remained silent, his jaw tightened, and for a fleeting moment, she sensed he was on the verge of revealing something deeper. Instead, he pivoted abruptly, marching out of the room and forcefully shutting the door behind him. The echo lingered in the penthouse, piercing and definitive. Lena remained motionless on the bed, her heart pounding, her fingers quivering against the smooth fabric of her robe. She could still sense the intensity of his stare, the warmth radiating from his eyes, the way they had held her attention just a moment too long. Her body was awakened in a way it hadn't been in months. The tension wound up tight, unwilling to let go. She caught a glimpse of the mirror on the wall, her reflection gazing back at her. Her eyes were bright and full of emotion, her cheeks a rosy hue. her lips gently parted as if holding a secret. She appeared unrepentant. It was something different altogether, something that stirred a knot in her stomach and sent her heart racing. Lena exhaled softly, her breath trembling as she reclined against the pillows, her fingers wandering lightly over her stomach. The weight of the moment lingered, yet she found herself lacking the heart, or perhaps the courage, to see it through to the end. Instead, she gazed up at the ceiling, the city lights creating ever-changing patterns on the smooth surface above her. Her thoughts spiraled, revisiting that moment endlessly, the way Ethan had gazed at her, the tremor in his voice, the way he had bolted as if the very air was ablaze. She turned onto her side, drawing herself inward, the silk robe gathering softly around her. The penthouse fell into silence once more, with only the soft hum of the air conditioning breaking the stillness and the soft echo of her heartbeat resonating in her ears. She shut her eyes, attempting to banish the thoughts swirling in her mind, yet they remained, persistent and unyielding. As she slipped into a troubled slumber, a single thought lingered, refusing to fade away. This was far from finished. 48 hours had slipped by since that moment in the bedroom, and the penthouse seemed transformed, electric, as if the very air was pausing, waiting for something to unfold. The dining table gleamed, its surface so polished that it mirrored the gentle illumination of the pendant light above. Between Lena and Ethan, takeout containers of Sichuan beef and dumplings rested, steam rising gently from the lids, creating a moment of warmth and comfort in the air. The aroma of garlic and chili oil enveloped the space, yet neither of them appeared to acknowledge it. Ethan sat across from Lena, his knee bouncing restlessly under the table, causing the chopsticks beside his plate to rattle in a quiet, anxious rhythm. He had avoided meeting her eyes since entering, his attention drawn to his meal, the table, or the wall behind her. Lena observed him intently, her fingers absent-mindedly swirling the Merlot in her glass, the wine's legs tracing delicate crimson lines down the sides. The silence hung thick between them, a weight that seemed ready to break apart at the slightest sound. Lena savored a slow sip of her wine, the sharp bitterness lingering on her tongue, and made the choice to speak her truth. "We need to talk about this," she said, her voice steady yet resolute. Ethan's gaze lifted, his dark eyes sharpening with intensity. "What should I focus on?" he whispered, jabbing at a dumpling with his fork. The soy sauce splattered onto the immaculate linen tablecloth, yet he appeared oblivious to it all. Lena leaned in a bit, her elbows on the table, her eyes unwavering. "Since that night, your gaze has been unwavering, always on me, as if you're anticipating my next move." "To what end?" he interrupted, his voice low and tinged with a certain intensity. His knuckles turned pale as he clutched his fork tightly. "Should I indulge in that again? Indeed, I am." The silence enveloped them, heavy and unrefined, as they stood there, momentarily frozen in place. Lena felt her heart race, yet her gaze remained steady. She was unable to. His gaze held an intensity she had never encountered, stirring something deep within her, causing her stomach to twist and her breath to falter. She savored another sip of her wine, the bitterness anchoring her in the moment. "It's been 6 months since my father has even laid a hand on me," she confessed, the words leaving a bitter aftertaste. It was unexpected, a moment of vulnerability where her thoughts escaped her lips unbidden. Ethan's expression shifted, a fleeting emotion crossing his features, leaving a hint of mystery in its wake. For a moment, he averted his gaze, his jaw clenched as if grappling with the weight of his own reflections. When he finally found the words, his voice was gravelly, almost lost in the silence. "I ended things with Sophie because your image kept haunting my thoughts when we—" He silenced himself, his jaw tightening, yet the intensity of his gaze spoke volumes. Lena felt a rush of emotion, her grip on the wine glass becoming more intense. She was caught off guard by that. She found herself taken aback by everything that unfolded. The room seemed to shrink in an instant, the walls pressing in, the atmosphere heavy with an unspoken tension and a shadowy presence she wasn't prepared to confront. She placed her glass on the table with a deliberate gentleness, the clink echoing more than she had hoped. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice unwavering even as her heart raced beneath the surface. "In the quiet of my room at 10 p.m., we shall sync with the beats. Nothing beyond that." Ethan's eyes met hers, deep and enigmatic, revealing nothing of his thoughts. For a moment, he remained silent, leaving her to ponder whether he would contest her words, whether he would seek further clarity. Yet, he gave a slight nod, only this one time, a swift, resolute gesture. The silence that followed felt more profound than ever, the gravity of their agreement hanging in the air like an uninvited guest at the table. Lena pushed her food around on the plate, her appetite lost amidst the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in her mind, each one tangled and elusive. Ethan sat there, not touching his food, his knee restless beneath the table, his eyes locked onto his plate. The dinner unfolded in a haze, the food left untouched as the atmosphere grew heavy with unspoken words. As the table was finally cleared, an uncomfortable silence enveloped them, leaving words unspoken between the two. The quiet that hung in the air was thick with unvoiced thoughts, a weighty presence that seemed destined to unfold. As Lena stood at the sink, rinsing her wine glass under the tap, she noticed Ethan's reflection in the window, a silent witness to her thoughts. He stood by the counter, arms crossed, his eyes locked onto her with an intensity that felt almost palpable. She sensed its heaviness, the warmth enveloping her, and it sent a shiver coursing down her spine. She remained facing away. Instead, she placed the glass down with care, drying her hands with a measured grace, each movement intentional and thoughtful. "Good night, Ethan," she whispered, her tone steady yet resolute. He paused before replying, leaving her in a moment of uncertainty, questioning whether he would break the limits they had just established. He gave a single nod, then turned away, his footsteps resonating softly as they faded down the hallway. Lena lingered in the kitchen long after he had left, her hands gently placed on the counter, her thoughts swirling in a tumultuous dance. The penthouse was quiet once more, yet this silence carried a different weight, as if it were charged and anticipating something profound. She exhaled unsteadily and switched off the lights, the darkness enveloping the room completely. As she made her way down the hallway to her bedroom, an unsettling sensation lingered within her, a sense that an unchangeable shift had occurred between her and Ethan. The following afternoon, the penthouse was enveloped in a golden sunlight that cast a warm, languid glow over everything, inviting a sense of ease and tranquility. Lena glided through the room, each step measured and intentional, her bare feet embracing the softness of the plush rug as she leaned down to tend to the fiddle-leaf fig nestled in the corner of the living room. She donned cut-off denim shorts paired with a cropped tank top. The fabric relaxed and easygoing, yet it hugged her figure in a way that revealed more than it concealed. Ethan lingered on the couch, the textbook sprawled open before him, yet the pages remained untouched for almost 30 minutes. He watched her every step, his eyes deep and inscrutable. Yet the tightness in his jaw revealed the turmoil within. Lena sensed his gaze, intense and unwavering, and she welcomed it. She truly embraced the moment, her movements taking on a slower, more intentional quality as she reached up to grasp the highest leaves of the plant. As she leaned forward, the hem of her shorts crept up, and she caught the sound of a sharp breath being drawn in behind her. She remained facing away, offering no recognition, Yet a subtle smirk played at the edge of her lips as she stood tall and made her way to the kitchen. The fridge was filled with bottles of water, and she took one, feeling the cool plastic against her palm. She unscrewed the cap and brought the bottle to her lips, savoring a deliberate sip, a few drops escaping as she leaned her head back. It trickled down her chin, cascading over her collarbones, and she let out a soft gasp, more for the sake of drama than anything else. "Oh dear," she whispered, placing the bottle aside and grabbing a paper towel. She noticed how Ethan's gaze lingered on the water trails, his jaw clenching as he turned his eyes elsewhere. "You're not being honest," he whispered, his tone heavy with tension. Lena shifted her gaze towards him, casually leaning against the counter as if inviting a deeper conversation. "I'm just thirsty," she replied, her tone seemingly innocent. Yet the glimmer in her eyes hinted at something deeper, as her bare foot glided up his calf beneath the table. He felt a jolt of surprise, his textbook slipping from his mind entirely. He cautioned against it, though there was a wavering uncertainty in his tone. "Don't what?" she inquired, her voice playful, as her foot leisurely traced a teasing journey up his leg. Ethan's gaze was fixed on hers, his eyes deep and penetrating. "Have you ever thought about this?" Lena smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips that left him momentarily breathless. She withdrew her foot and reached for her water bottle, leaving him there, his textbook abandoned, heart pounding in his chest. The afternoon slipped away, filled with a series of intentional, quiet moments. Lena reaches up to a high shelf, bends down to retrieve a dropped napkin, and leans over the counter to grab a pen. Every movement was deliberate, crafted to challenge Ethan's determination, and each time, she noticed his eyes lingering, his jaw clenching as he struggled to divert his gaze. As dinner approached, the atmosphere between them grew thick with tension, a heavy presence that lingered in the air, reminiscent of a storm on the verge of unleashing its fury. They sat together, the air thick with unspoken thoughts, the soft clink of cutlery against plates the sole witness to their quietude. Lena's foot brushed against his once more beneath the table, and this time he chose to stay, as the last dish was removed. A heavy silence settled between them, words unspoken yet echoing in the air. The quiet that hung in the air was thick with unexpressed emotions, a weighty presence that seemed destined to unfold. As Lena stood at the sink, rinsing her plate under the tap, she noticed Ethan's reflection in the window, a moment that felt heavy with unspoken words. He stood by the counter, arms crossed, his eyes locked onto her. She sensed its heaviness, the warmth enveloping her, and it sent a shiver coursing down her spine. She remained facing away. Instead, she placed the plate down with care and dried her hands, each movement slow and intentional. "My sanctuary." 10 p.m., do you recall?" she inquired, her tone steady yet resolute. He gave a single nod before turning away, his footsteps resonating softly as they faded down the hallway. The hour inched toward 10, and Lena's bedroom was shrouded in a gentle dimness, the sole illumination coming from the soft glow of the TV across the room. She perched on the edge of the king-sized bed, her fingers anxiously dancing over the silk sheets. The atmosphere was heavy with expectation, accompanied by the soft murmur of the air conditioning, making no effort to alleviate the strain that had been growing between her and Ethan throughout the day. The door let out a soft creak as Ethan entered, gently shutting it behind him. He paused, his eyes lingering on her for a brief moment, her bare legs, the delicate strap of her nightgown slipping off one shoulder, the way she averted his gaze. He began to speak, but Lena interrupted him with a decisive shake of her head. "Sit," she said, her voice steady yet authoritative, motioning to the space next to her on the bed. Ethan paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, before he finally complied, lowering himself onto the mattress while maintaining a deliberate space between them. The bed sank slightly as he settled in, and Lena sensed the warmth emanating from him, despite the space that lingered between them. The remote quivered gently in her grasp as she aimed it at the TV, the screen awakening with a flicker. The Offerings for Forbidden Family. Volume 12 emerged, its title striking and unyielding. Lena felt her heart race, a constriction in her throat as she pressed play. The grainy film started, the camera gliding over an opulent bedroom before focusing on a woman in her 40s, her lace teddy revealing much more than it concealed. She rested against the desk, her hips gently swaying as she spoke to the young man sitting on the bed, her stepson. "Allow me to share some insights about anatomy," the actress whispered, her voice smooth and enticing. Lena's breath caught in her throat, her fingers clenching the sheets as the moment played out before her. The atmosphere between her and Ethan was charged, a heavy weight that made each breath feel laborious. She sensed his intense gaze upon her, warm and weighty, yet she remained focused on the screen, refusing to divert her attention. The actress sighed gently, her speech interspersed with soft breaths. In that moment, she whispered softly, her fingers gliding gently along her skin. Next to her. Ethan moved slightly, his breaths coming in fits and starts. Lena stole a look his way and noticed him awkwardly adjusting the waistband of his boxers. She averted her gaze in a flash, her cheeks aflame, yet the rustle of fabric falling to the ground sent her heart racing. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she grasped the edge of her nightgown. The fabric caressed her skin as she removed it, leaving her clad only in a delicate pair of cotton lingerie. She paused, her heart racing, before allowing them to slip from her grasp and tumble to the ground. Ethan's groan resonated through the mattress, causing Lena to catch her breath at the unexpected sound. She sensed his eyes on her, a heat radiating from his stare, yet she chose not to meet his gaze. Instead, she turned her attention to the TV, her hand moving slowly and with hesitation as she attempted to replicate the actress's movements. The atmosphere was still, punctuated only by their labored breaths and the soft, distant murmur of the television. Lena felt her heart racing, a vibrant tension coursing through her body that she hadn't experienced in years. She sensed Ethan beside her, his every movement echoing her own, the warmth emanating from him clouding her thoughts. The actress on the screen emitted a piercing cry, her body contorting as she approached the climax. Lena's breath caught in her throat, her body quaking as she mirrored the moment. Next to her, Ethan emitted a soft sound, causing Lena's gaze to shift toward him without her even thinking about it. His eyes were tightly shut, his jaw set firm, his body coiled with anxiety. The silence that enveloped them was palpable, a weight in the air that constricted her chest, making each breath feel like a struggle. Lena's body quaked slightly as she fought to regain her composure. "You need to go to bed," she urged, her voice trembling yet resolute. Ethan paused, his eyes darting to her hand. He averted his gaze, a deep blush creeping across his cheeks as he rose to his feet, fumbling with his boxers as he pulled them on with trembling hands. He walked away in silence, gently shutting the door as he departed. Lena sat motionless on the bed, her thoughts swirling, her body still vibrating with the echoes of the recent events. As she looked down at her fingers, a warm blush crept up to her cheeks, the idea of Ethan's eyes resting on them, if only for a fleeting second. The screen danced with light, the credits slowly making their exit. Yet Lena remained still. She sat there, gazing at the screen, her mind swirling with a multitude of thoughts that felt impossible to unravel. The sun poured in through the expansive windows of the penthouse, bathing the sleek modern kitchen in a soft, golden light. Lena found herself at the Marble Island, her coffee cup held gently in her hands, the steam rising softly into the atmosphere, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee intertwined with the warm scent of toast. Yet her breakfast remained neglected. her thoughts still swirling from the events of the night before. Ethan stood there, his back turned to her, methodically spreading butter on a slice of toast, each movement measured and intentional. The silence enveloped them, thick and palpable, as if the very air had grown too sparse to draw in a breath. Lena's gaze wandered to him, her eyes following the contours of his broad shoulders, observing how his muscles flexed beneath his t-shirt with each movement. She turned her gaze, finding solace in the warmth of her coffee instead. Last night's events lingered in her thoughts, a haunting replay of the grainy images, the rhythm of his breath, and the intensity of his stare. Her cheeks flushed at the recollection, and she took a deliberate sip of her coffee, seeking solace in its bitterness. "I want to see you finish tonight," Ethan said suddenly, his voice low yet resolute. Lena's coffee cup clinked against the marble counter, a few drops of the rich liquid escaping and staining the immaculate surface. Her heart raced, and she found it hard to breathe as she gazed at him. "That wasn't the deal," she said, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Ethan turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that felt almost palpable. He licked butter off his thumb, the gesture slow and deliberate, and Lena felt a knot tighten in her stomach at the sight. "Agreements shift," he remarked, his tone steady yet resolute. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken feelings, his words lingering in the stillness like a heavy burden. Lena felt a whirlwind of thoughts swirling in her mind, her heart thumping fiercely in her chest as she searched for the perfect words to say. She tried to speak, to bring up the limits they had agreed upon, but the words stuck in her throat. Ethan's gaze held steady, his dark eyes piercing into hers with a depth that clouded her thoughts. "Well," he urged, his voice gravelly. Lena paused, her grip on the coffee cup growing firmer. The sensation of his gaze upon her, following her every move, sent a chill coursing through her body. It felt overwhelming, deeply intimate, and fraught with risk. Yet, she found it impossible to ignore the warmth that twisted within her at the thought. She began, her voice trembling slightly. She averted her eyes, letting them fall to the coffee that had splattered across the counter. "I'll take some time to reflect on that." Ethan paused, the silence lingering in the air, thick and palpable, as if waiting for something to be said. He nodded, a single, deliberate gesture, before returning his focus to the toaster, reaching for another slice of bread. The atmosphere in the room remained thick with unease. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with unspoken words. As Lena remained still at the counter, her coffee slowly losing its warmth in her grasp, the remainder of the morning unfolded in a haze of uncomfortable pauses and fleeting looks exchanged between us. Lena sat at her desk, her laptop aglow before her, yet her mind wandered repeatedly to Ethan. No matter how hard she tried to concentrate on her tasks, in the way he had gazed at her during breakfast, the warmth in his eyes, the way his voice had sent a delightful shiver down her spine, Ethan, it appeared, was resolute in his choice to carry on as though nothing had transpired. He glided through the penthouse, embodying his typical effortless elegance, the gym bag casually draped over his shoulder as he set out for his morning workout. But Lena noticed how his gaze held on to her, how his jaw clenched when he believed she was unaware. As evening approached, the tension between them became almost palpable, a charged energy that hung heavily in the air. Lena wandered restlessly through the living room, her thoughts swirling chaotically, each one a thread she struggled to untie. As the clock chimed 10, Ethan gently tapped on her bedroom door, and when he entered, his presence enveloped the space. Lena stood by the window, arms crossed tightly, her heart racing within her chest. "Well," he urged, his voice husky and gravelly. Lena paused, her eyes darting to his expression. The depth in his eyes stirred something within her, causing a flutter in her stomach. Yet she summoned the strength to hold his gaze. All right, she finally spoke, her voice just a soft murmur. The evening air in the penthouse was laden with an unvoiced tension, creating an atmosphere where the walls seemed to close in, and the silence felt almost tangible. Lena sat on the couch, the remote held loosely in her hand, her fingers anxiously tracing its edge. Ethan reclined next to her, his demeanor relaxed, yet his eyes intense. A glance that sent her heart racing without a single word exchanged. The television whispered gently, its light spilling softly into the corners of the room. They had settled on 9, but the term settled hardly conveyed the tension that lingered between them. Lena attempted to reassure herself that this was merely another night, yet the recollection of the prior evening lingered Ethan's unwavering gaze. The way his breath caught as he observed her was a haunting presence she couldn't dispel. It hung around, a constant presence that trailed her every step. Another film. Huh, Ethan inquired, his voice light. Yet there was a sharpness that couldn't be ignored. Lena took a moment, her uncertainty palpable. Before finally giving a slight nod, she navigated the menu, feeling a knot form in her throat as the title Mature Solitaire emerged on the screen. The thumbnail stirred something deep within her, featuring a woman with a knowing smile, her posture open and inviting, exuding confidence even in the quietness of the image. Ethan remained silent, yet Lena sensed his gaze upon her as she pressed play. The film opened with a gentle sweep across a bedroom, the camera taking its time to focus on the woman as she lay back on the bed. She wore a silk robe, the fabric parting gently as she stretched, her fingers gliding softly over her skin. The actress looked straight into the lens, her smile carrying a hint of allure as she spoke to the camera. At times, she softly remarked, a woman must prioritize her own well-being. Lena felt her breath catch, her fingers clenching the remote with urgency. She sensed Ethan's presence next to her, his warmth enveloping her, his gaze unwavering on the screen. The actress moved with intention, each gesture filled with meaning, and Lena felt her heart race as the woman's breath caught in her throat. Imitation. Ethan spoke up unexpectedly, his tone quiet yet resolute. Lena stood still, her heart racing within her chest. "What is it that troubles you?" she inquired, her voice a mere whisper. "Confessor," Ethan reiterated, his voice firm and resolute. When she paused, he said, "Or I'll leave." The words lingered in the air, weighty and conclusive, causing a knot to form in Lena's stomach. His gaze was upon her, intense and filled with anticipation, and she understood he was being entirely sincere, with a heavy heart. She placed the remote aside, her fingers quivering as they moved to the edge of her nightgown. The fabric slipped from her shoulders, gathering at her waist until she finally released it entirely. She paused, a flush creeping across her cheeks, before finally letting go of the final barrier that stood between her and the intensity of Ethan's gaze. The actress on the screen moved with an undeniable rhythm, her body arching as her touch became increasingly insistent. Lena felt her breath catch as she attempted to follow the motions, her movements uncertain initially, but becoming more assured as she surrendered to the experience. The sound of Ethan's choked gasp was the only assurance she required that he was indeed observing her. The atmosphere was still, punctuated only by the irregular rhythm of their breaths, mingling with the soft murmur of the television in the background. "Keep going," Ethan urged, his voice gravelly and worn. Lena complied, her body quaking as the strain wound itself ever more tightly around her. The sounds of the actress echoed softly in the space, rich and enticing, causing Lena's breath to catch as she mirrored the moment. As she finally reached her peak, her body arched in a moment of release. She caught the sound of Ethan's low groan beside her. He shifted abruptly, his hands clasping her arms as he drew her closer to him. His kiss came out of nowhere, chaotic and unrefined, his teeth grazing her lip as his tongue explored her mouth. Lena's thoughts swirled, Yet she found herself yielding. Instead, she returned the kiss, her fingers weaving through his hair as he pulled her from the couch and led her toward his room. The bedroom was gently illuminated by the faint light of the city beyond the window. Shadows loomed in the room, their elongated forms creating a tapestry of uneven silhouettes on the walls. The atmosphere hung thick in the air, imbued with a silent intensity that made the space feel more confined than it truly was. Lena perched on the edge of the bed, her body still resonating softly from the events that had just unfolded in the living room. The fabric draped softly around her legs, her fingers wandering restlessly along its edge as she sought to find her balance. Her body, honed and resilient from years of dedication, carried a palpable tension, each muscle tensed, as if striving to keep itself intact. Ethan stood a few feet away, his back turned to her as he removed his shirt. The soft glow illuminated the angles of his shoulders, highlighting the shape of his body as he shifted. His breathing came in fits and starts, his movements deliberate yet lacking fluidity, as if he were struggling to maintain control over himself. As he turned to her, their gazes intertwined, a silent connection forming between them, heavy, profound, and laden with an unsettling sensation that coiled within her gut. For what felt like an eternity, silence enveloped them. The air hung heavy with unspoken words, a tension that seemed ready to shatter at the slightest disturbance. Ethan moved closer to her, each step soft and deliberate, his bare feet making no sound on the floor. His eyes were locked onto hers, and Lena struggled to break the connection. "Are you truly certain about this?" he inquired, his tone hushed and a bit gravelly. Lena hesitated, her grip on the sheet growing firmer. Her mind was a whirlwind, tangled with doubt and desire, leaving her struggling to find clarity. "Do you find yourself in that place?" she inquired, her voice a mere whisper. Ethan paused before responding. Instead, he stepped closer, his hands resting on her shoulders as he softly guided her back onto the bed. Lena experienced a deep sense of surrender as her body melted into the mattress, his presence enveloping her, steady and comforting. "For weeks now. I've been certain," he whispered, his lips gently grazing her ear. His voice carried a gentle strength, each word wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. It happened in a blur, their actions hurried and nearly desperate, as if they feared that this fleeting moment could vanish at any second. Ethan's hands glided over her, his touch steady yet gentle, igniting warmth in every place they lingered. Lena's fingers pressed firmly into his back, her breath,